we have a great opportunity with us, especially in solar. If I can talk about solar per se, it's there in wind too. With this government declaration of 450 megawatt of renewables by the end of this decade, uh, if I take where we are and where we should be in this at the end of the decade, we are looking for around 35 gigawatt of per annum installation on an average.
Welcome to the Blue Circle. Thank you everyone for joining in today. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists, some who are already members with us, are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience that they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us as well. We've received close to 300 registrations, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are members as well, and some are repeat visitors to our webinars, which is very encouraging and motivates us to provide higher levels of dialogue through the online modes as well. For those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is an exclusive community and ecosystem which is curated for business leaders to help them manage disruptive times and become future ready. We focus on 4 fundamental sectors, which are energy, mobility, healthcare, and real estate. We're also very soon adding 4 more new sectors, which are aerospace and defense, retail, BFSI, and logistics. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. In response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series, our digital publication. And in addition to this, and you'll be happy to know that we're very soon launching a unique platform, an exclusive digital professional networking platform, which is curated specifically for leaders, somewhat like the LinkedIn for Leaders, where leaders will get the opportunity for connecting with people just like them. We'll also house our high quality curated conversations and content there, and also give leaders some access to business opportunities which they can exchange with each other. So those leaders who are interested, please do write to us. We've already begun our selective outreach and have close to 3,000 senior leaders who've signed up with us already. So today we're privileged to have industry leaders to join in us for our Energy Circles discussion. In recent years, India has brought electricity connections to hundreds of millions of its citizens, promoted the adoption of highly efficient LED lighting by most households, and prompted a massive expansion in renewable source of energy led by solar. As India recovers from a COVID-induced slump in 2020, it is re-entering a very dynamic period in its energy development. Today, we explore the opportunities, roadblocks, and way forward for India as it seeks to ensure reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy to a growing population while achieving its target of 175 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2022. The topic for the session is Power Sector Outlook 2021, a defining year for India's clean energy future. Now, in the best interest of time, I will just briefly mention the names and designations of the leaders who have joined us. We have with us Mr. Hitesh Doshi, Chairman and MD, Vari Group, Mr. Rakesh Malhotra, Founder, Livguard Energy Technologies, Mr. Ashish Khanna, President, Renewable Tata Power, and our chair and moderator for the session is Mr. Pawan Chaudhary, best-selling author, public intellectual, CEO of French multinational, and sits on several boards across the country. Thank you very much, sirs, for joining in. It's an absolute privilege. And I request Mr. Chaudhary to please chair and moderate the session, sir.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. And a very distinguished panel we have of big achievers and big pioneers. So if we look at the primary energy supply of the world, 80% of it comes from fossil fuels still. 70% of all greenhouse gases also come from these energy-related activities. However, the world energy systems are transforming due to the rapid shifts in technological development, regulations, consumer preferences, and investor sentiment. And what a change which is coming. That right now, 70% of our, I was just going through the IEA study, which says that 70% of our power generation in India still comes from coal, and only about 5% comes from solar. But in 2040, it will be 30% from coal, 30% from solar, and 30% from other sources, which also, of course, includes the hydro and other sources. So, given this kind of a background which we are seeing all over the world, and the estimate that 70% of demand increases or capacity increases, which will come in the renewable space, will come from only 3 countries in the next 10 years, China, US, and India. This is the broad backdrop which I wanted to present before I go to Rakesh. Rakesh Malhotra, as you know, is a pioneer in this space and the managing director and chairman of Livguard. So I would like to ask him, Rakesh, where do you think this market is going, and where does energy storage system and distributive electricity modules fit in here? What's your prognosis and what's your forecast for these 2 subsectors? Rakesh.
Thanks, Pawan. So first of all, just a small correction. I am not the chairman or managing director of Livguard. I'm only the founder.
All right.
There's a team over there which runs that operation now. But to answer your question, see, our role or our participation in this business is largely in 2 areas. One is the storage side of the story, which is as a battery manufacturer, which is our core business. And the other part of our business related to renewables is the rooftop solar and the real distributed power generation close to demand or at the source at demand. So distributed power generation. Those are the 2 areas we participate in. So I'll probably allude to those 2 areas in what we have to say. So I think both of those areas are somewhat at a lag compared to the rest of the renewable push that India has been able to give, especially in these large-scale wind and solar generation assets. But I think they are potentially very large growth opportunities going forward, not just in the next year, but over the next 5-6 years. We see these as really large growth opportunities for renewable adoption. So I see a massive, high double-digit, in 20s, 30s percentage of CAGR for rooftop solar. In my understanding, both residential and commercial rooftop solar adoption will have a very serious growth over the next 5-7 years. That's what we are aiming at. And we also see storage, especially this whole, lithium-ion battery and cell manufacturing activities under the PLI becoming a fairly big driver both for e-mobility as well as for energy sector as large opportunities. So as an introduction, probably that's, if you ask me for a prognosis, I'm very excited about both these opportunities.
Yeah. So I think prognosis now was not the right word. It was an optimistic forecast, which I wanted to say. And I'm glad to hear that you are looking at this space so optimistically. A supplementary question which I'd like to ask you is, how well do you think has a shared understanding and a shared roadmap developed between the industry and the government and other stakeholders in this space?
See, look, I think we are a little bit behind the curve, both on storage as well as on distributed generation. in terms of shared understanding and a roadmap on that issue. So we are still in that space where policy is now on, now off area. Like for example, we've had this, feed-in tariff or net metering issue on rooftop installations above 10 kilowatt for now hurting that whole business for nearly over a year. Now it's going back and forth. It'll get resolved, but it was quite an unnecessary hurdle or a roadblock for something that was just about beginning to take off, right? So something like that. Similarly, we for a long period of time, I think in Delhi, Tata Power, as part of the DISCOM, did some experimentation also on the time of day tariff, experiments, and really that arbitrage of energy prices at peak demand versus low demand is what will be the biggest driver of adoption of storage at consumer or commercial level. It can't be anything else. But policy clarity on that or directional clarity on that is still work in progress. I don't think it's anywhere close to clear.
Yeah. So technology always leads policy or regulatory understanding. You're absolutely right. The role and value of energy storage is not fully understood, especially large-scale stationary battery energy storage, and also the renewable penetration is not so high. So the highlight which you want to throw on, or the spotlight which you want to throw on peak demand, how will you meet peak demand? Perhaps has not illuminated everybody's mindscape in this area. Coming to Hitesh, you are also a very big pioneer in the photovoltaic piece. How do you look at the market evolving, both from the manufacturing side and the deployment side? Hitesh.
Thank you very much. I think I have my senior here from the Tata Power, and Ashish will give better. But what I personally think is that this solar is something like a technology, and this is going to grow much faster than what it has grown in the past. And the drivers will be definitely a green energy, fast deployment, and the economic cost of it. So I personally see whatever we have seen so far, the growth, it's very small. The deployment side, demand side, it is going to increase in a multiple folds in the coming days. And of course, with the new government policies, push for the Make in India, there will be a lot of new manufacturing units in the country or expansion of the existing units. And there we will see also the huge opportunities of manufacturing and the components required to manufacture the solar panels and other things. So generation as well as manufacturing, we'll see in next 5 years, huge opportunities.
So Ashish, you sit at a vantage position where Tata Power's renewals, which you head, is also in the other side of power. So you are an energy major, which is into renewables as well as non-renewables. And your focus, of course, is on low carbon leadership. So where do you think that the industry is going from the photovoltaic cell manufacturing as well as the deployment? And how will we ensure that those technologies which will come into relative disuse eventually, they are also not left high and dry and they can be co-opted in this unequivocal march of renewables forward? Ashish.
Thanks, Pawanji, and good afternoon, everyone. Like every time you always ask the most difficult question to the last panelist.
I keep it for you in the end because as they say, we bring the slog over handler in the end.
Okay, but on a serious note, I think It's a great question to ask on where we are and how we are and where we should be. I think both Rakesh and Hitesh Bhai has directionally put the things in the right perspective. Let me put it across that, somehow uh, we have a great opportunity with us, especially in solar. If I can talk about solar per se, it's there in wind too. With this government declaration of 450 megawatt of renewables by the end of this decade, uh, if I take where we are and where we should be in this at the end of the decade, we are looking for around 35 gigawatt of per annum installation on an average. I'm just dividing what is there and what is not there in solar and around 10 gigawatt in wind. It would come in a hybrid form or RTC form is a different matter. But all I'm saying is we are looking towards directionally some 35 gigawatts and 45 gigawatts in total of renewable capacity added in this country every year. It comes from rooftop, it comes from distributed generation, it comes from utility, it comes from within India, made in modules or otherwise is a larger question per se. But that's where directionally we are moving on. Now the challenge today is that, which you alluded very nicely, is somehow we have made it this versus that, solar versus fossil fuel in that manner. We don't know why. We need both. We are currently in a situation. I think the optics of these tariffs are not helping the larger cause of what we should be doing for the industry, for the country, and for our businesses too. This whole game of making it less than 2 rupees and then competing with the other fossil fuel was not the right thing for this country. The best part about our industry, which both Rakesh and Nitesh Bhai will agree with me, is that technology changes so fast that every time you are installing something or you are investing in something, you are ahead. You're never late, even if you are late in your life to enter into that domain. So we have a great advantage of entering at any particular time, which we did in the last 6 years phenomenally well. I think what we need today is now, after having experienced this fact that we can have a least most optimum cost option, as well as solar is concerned. Even wind yesterday, we have seen a tariff of 2 rupees 77 paisa, which is again heartening to see. Hybrid will come in between somewhere on that region. Can we co-opt with the storage and with our current assets, which you may call non-clean or in any other manner, for providing the 24 by 7 services, and then look for those solutions which Rakesh very aptly put across. Can we look for how do we save energy, or at least the current tariffs which are going to the consumer, how do we serve the consumer in the best manner? Today we are just trying to somehow pool in the energy in the grid, and then trying to see whether the energy, if it is renewable, how are we stabilizing it, is it distributed generation or not. I think today we should all be pooling our efforts to look around that this customer or a consumer who is going to be served with this energy, how do we give him the least cost option in that particular manner? Because most of us, especially on the industry side, are paying a tariff which is much higher than what we are seeing as an optics in which the utility scales are working. And we have a technology, whether it is what part of the day what can serve. If even if you map, we did that exercise for many cities. Let me share with you. What we simply did is the demand curve of a city, say Delhi, Mumbai, and we did many others too. In a typical curve of a solar and a typical curve of a wind, and if I take the balance portion coming from somewhere, and for the whole year, we realize that there is a great solution possible in operating our thermals, operating our hydros, putting the new technologies of storage, and taking advantage of this great potential which this country have on of sun as well as wind. We are blessed with it. It is not a rocket science. Somehow in this our system, we have been having only pure vanilla system and looking at a very myopic way in this whole system. So I think we should now, all of us, whether we are having fossil fuel storage, rooftop, utility scale, distributed generation, smart meter manufacturer, pool our intelligentsia together and work for this solution, and it can be great for the consumer, great for each one of our business too.
Excellent points. So first of all, you said that let it not be them and us kind of a piece. And I fully agree with that. That will also prevent them to stop spoking our piece, as well as give them alternative means of survival. And this was very well done by many governments. For example, the US government, when it was phasing out chlorofluorocarbons, it asked those companies which were making chlorofluorocarbons to find substitutes for those, and gave them grants. Like DuPont got a grant to find substitutes for chlorofluorocarbon, so that whatever market they lose, they also get some impetus from the government in gaining the substitute and healthier products market. Get a head start kind of a thing. Very good point. The second point which you said was pricing. This them versus us also brings us into this pricing game, which then after some time is not staying sacrosanct. Pricing is getting challenged in courts. Price which has been agreed, which is getting challenged on courts. Third point which you said was leapfrogging. That because technology is changing very fast, so it doesn't mean that if you have missed one particular lap, you cannot come as an equal contender in the second lap. And this has also been witnessed in India and Africa, let us say, in the case of telephony, where the landline system had really not become proper. It was really a nascent stage, particularly in Africa. And they came out with such a good mobile telephony system because that was the new technology. And now, for example, a country like India is so well covered through telephony, which was very poorly covered through landlines. So great points. And the last point which you made, I'll come back to you on that point. The Renewable Energy Ministry has been gradually moving away from issuing tenders for plain vanilla solar and wind projects and towards complex and hybrid ones. What is your take on this transition? And I'll leave you with this question so that you can mull over it and come back with a 360-degree view on that when I come back to you next. Let me go to Rakesh. So Rakesh, there is another piece which is coming out in the IEA report, which is about peak demand. So what are your observations on peak demand, which should reach the ears and eyes of the decision maker also, so that he is aware of how he should roll the policy or the encouragement initiatives forward?
So I think before the recommendations for the policymakers, I think let's understand the context of the whole issue of demand versus supply. So see, power sector or the energy sector in the beginning started as a generation-led business, and then it eventually from generation went to transmission, distribution, and so on and so forth. Whereas in reality, as the demand mix changed over time, so when residential, consumer, commercial demand is a large part of the demand mix, then the certainty of demand is not that high. So at the end of the day, it is a dynamic demand situation, right? I mean, you're like Ashish was saying that you can have very different demand position and in a city, or for that matter, even in a small part of a city. Time of day demand, could be very different if it is especially a residential-led demand. So the question is, if the demand is dynamic, if we can find a way to have the supply side which can match that dynamic demand portfolio, then you are likely to be a lot more efficient in the whole system end to end, right? From generation to consumption. And wherever you can't match it, globally, it has been, finally, anywhere else in the world, if you look at it, energy costs are largely designed in such a way, or prices are designed in such a way that they are changing certain demand behaviors to avoid for unnecessary peaking that can be avoided. So it's essentially some kind of a flexibility and freedom to price around demand, in my view, will change consumer behavior dramatically. And it's been seen by industrial consumers everywhere in the country. Wherever industrial consumers are charged at peak demand rate, they have found ways and means to figure out their energy consumption in such a way that they don't have very high peak loads during the peak time. So I think time of day tariff or demand-led tariff or some kind of freedom in that, which is something which is being experimented everywhere and implemented in many places. Even here in Singapore, where I am right now, there is a lot of experimentation going on with multiple providers of energy, whom you can go to based on who sells at what price at what time, right? So I think those are the kind of areas where we are definitely going to have to head to, but we are in early days right now for the conviction to build in the policymakers on how to deal with this. But once that is done, arbitrage will come in, and everything from storage to renewable to distributed power generation will take off in a big way.
Excellent point. In fact, you have said that earlier it was generation, transmission, and distribution. There was no storage. That means power was a product which had no inventory. There was only constant generation and constant use. And but the demand is dynamic, and today we have AI systems which can identify grid congestion, peak demand, demand behavior, and you are saying that we can also alter demand behavior by altering the tariff structures. I'll come back to you. Meanwhile, Hitesh, how do you feel that the PLI for photovoltaic cells, which has come, will give a fillip to this to the manufacturing of these products in India? What's your view on that?
Right. As we all know that there is a huge gap between the cost structure in China and India. And this is a reason we are not seeing any large investment in a manufacturing sector. So government has came up with this PLI scheme to attract the investment and push the manufacturing. So definitely we will see a good interest in this project, and we will see a good type of the technology is also coming in, since this is linked to the efficiency of the cells and modules in this PLI scheme. What challenge I am seeing is that the amount has been planned, and the number of, I will say, thousands of megawatt, 5,000 megawatt, what we are seeing, it is too small. So probably government just want to test it now and see how this is working. But overall, this is a good to bring it here. Of course, since the amount is a small, there will be a challenge to compete the other countries' manufacturers, especially from China. And for this, BCD will be required to back it up. And government has already announced that. So with this, I'm sure this will work in India and it will grow.
Great. So you are very optimistic, and I am also upbeat. I really want that this should happen. On BCD, I will go to Ashish and ask him how will the BCD affect the deployment which is already on way at yesterday's prices. But before that, the fact that China had only 2 among the top 10 cell manufacturers in the world about 10 years back. Today, all the top 10 are Chinese. And they have also consolidated the smaller ones with the bigger ones almost forcefully, because they can do that, and thus got a lot of economies of scale, staffing, purchasing, etc. Do you feel that with this PLI, and I come back to Hitesh before I go to Ashish, do you feel that this PLI, also let me go on this to Rakesh, do you feel that this PLI can have some side effects also? And if yes, what can they be, and how can they be surmounted well in time so that overall it ends up as a successful scheme? Rakesh.
So I think Hitesh is a better person to answer this. I will take the question uh, on PLI in general and as it applies to, let's say, energy storage or lithium, that ACC PLI scheme that has come in, because that's an area where we operate or we would like to operate. See, there are both sides to the coin of the PLI scheme. While in case of batteries, for example, lithium batteries, it is absolutely necessary to kickstart some sort of an investment and manufacturing process to begin in India early on, because otherwise your dependence, especially in the mobility sector, would be too critical or too important to let go. And therefore, you can't afford to miss the bus. So it's good to have that PLI scheme. I think it's a welcome step. It hasn't got notified yet, but I'm sure it will get done in some time. But the flip side to that is that you are pre-deciding some winners, at least in the short term, and which then means that there is a certain degree of competitive intensity leading to innovation that will get missed for some period of time because you are artificially tinkering with the market to some degree. But I guess at least for batteries, I believe that it is required to be done. And my own belief is that the size of the ACC PLI scheme, which is 50 gigawatt hours, if it gets subscribed, it will be a time of maybe 3 to 4 years before the demand so dramatically overshoots that capacity that competitive mismatch will no longer be an issue. But it would have kickstarted the manufacturing process. So it's a price to pay for getting started. But I believe that it's only when that learning comes in and you have actually got some real genuine local capability. See, it's not just about investment, right? It's also about technical capability. It's also about knowledge. It's also about technology assimilation, even if you buy it. So all of that will have to take some time, and I guess it has to start somewhere. And these PLI schemes are useful from that point of view, but they shouldn't be taken too far, in my view.
Great point. And that is what I wanted you to bring up. And on that, I would like to ask Hitesh that what Rakesh is saying is that if the PLI scheme will help the big ones, it can smother the small ones. And if it smothers the small ones, then the ecosystem which requires both the big ones and the small ones kind of suffers. The big ones are needed for creating the right currents in which the small ones can fly the right currents of quality, standards, etc. The smaller ones are required for innovation and frugality and bringing it into the industry. So this is the point I would like to ask you, Hitesh. Do you feel that there is, of course, need for PLI scale of support which is coming to be increased, but does it go somewhere in empowering the ecosystem of small players who are also important in making it endure and thrive? Hitesh.
I think let us see this picture a little bit from 30,000 feet. That 80% to 90% modules in this country we are importing. So what we are importing? We are importing the energy for next 25 years together. And the money is going out of the country. It will never come back, right? With some support, if the money stays in a country, it will be in our cycle and economy always here. The another point we have on a module manufacturing side is there is a cost difference. When you import the finished product, probably after July, we will not have the duties till the new duties comes in. But you import the machines or you import the raw material, there are the huge duties. So there is a one delta of more than 10% of the cost is this. And the second is the manufacturing culture. You can say the government support, electricity prices, scale of economy they have, the size they have. This brings another close to the 10% gap. So if we do not bring a PLI or other support to the manufacturing, last 10 or 11 years, we have not seen a much growth in the manufacturing, and that will continue. So not to do or not to continue this, we must have the PLI. So to answer your the first question, yes, there will be a challenges that what will happen to the small or medium manufacturers. But you are giving the PLI first to encounter the 80 to 90% import, not to fight with the 10-20% market share manufacturers who are enjoying in India. So I see that gap. The second thing is if there are any new technologies coming in, all large players would like to be the part of it. They would like to invest with them and grow this technology. And this is exactly happening in US. If you look to the any good startups or even the companies who has grown up to the certain stage in technologies, their investors today are the large investors. They have the now capacity to invest and support. So in my opinion, more manufacturing in India, there will be not only the more R&D in India, but more support to the startup to bring the new technologies. So I personally see it other way around.
Excellent point. What you are saying is that the world is crowded with very mega giants. If you will not create some giants here, you will not be able to compete with them. So it is very important to create those giants through government support and maybe even higher government support. So, and then around them an ancillary system, I hope, will form, which will bring in those OEM suppliers, those vendors, those supporters, and so on. Great point, excellent point, and I fully agree with this. So there is a case, I feel, for the Adanis and the Tatas and even Livguard and Varis to be supported by the government. If the government will be too inclusive, and as it did, for example, in hardware, electronic hardware, we did not have any giants coming out. We had very, very small companies still staying there, except in the last 4 or 5 years. So I feel that the big ones have to be supported. I fully agree with you, Hitesh. Very well made point. I would like to ask Ashish now to comment on the dialogue so far of this round, and then also ask him about the hybrid issue that he spoke of, and I elaborated with a question. Ashish.
I echo the thoughts of Hitesh Bhai on this, and so is Rakesh on that. We need manufacturing in this country. We all know why we were not having it. You have to appreciate one fact here that China has not only consolidated their manufacturing, they have also enhanced immensely their manufacturing capabilities. Now today, what China produces is more than what the world needs to. They have reached that level. But the most important fact, which we should also appreciate, is how quickly they are also changing the technology and in the way advancing that technologies too. So their investment in technologies today, especially in the solar sector, is what bringing the next level of technologies at a much lower cost than what it used to be 3 years back or 5 years back. So you have to appreciate and learn from what is happening good around us. And now if we need to, first of all, replicate the same model in this country or try to beat them as an exporter in the third countries, we have to be also very conscious of these facts of life that the volume matters, your investments in R&D and technology matters. And I think above all, where we can actually leapfrog again is that if we start investing in the next level of technologies, which are required in this country and many parts of the world, let me put an example of rooftops. We don't need these panels for rooftop. We can have much lighter panels, and there are technologies available to bring that lighter panels, foldable panels, as we speak about it. There are lots of other things which we can do on this. So I think first of all, to enhance the manufacturing capabilities in this country, it is important that we ring fence first the manufacturing. Unlike, since I wear many hats, when we go for an investment in any solar project or opportunities which come, it's a one-time transaction which we do. We bid, we win, we execute, and then for next 25 years we have a return on our investments which give a ROI. In manufacturing, you have to stay there for 25 years, and you have to keep on investing, especially in this particular manufacturing of panels or cells as it comes across. I think the challenge which we will face again here is, while we are going to ring fence the cell and module, the raw material for cell, which is wafers in the current form, and the raw material for wafers, which is ingots, it still has to be imported. So what we are doing out here is we are creating infrastructure for, if I can use that word, tolling, or a conversion from a wafers to a panel. Now that itself is a great source of generation of employment, a great source of supporting high quality products for the country for which it is required, because we guarantee it for 25 years. But having said that, if we are not doing this upstream integration and are leaving that particular part out from the whole game, we will not be doing a great job, because then the variability on those prices will impact our product pricing per se, at least in the international market. The second part, which is also very important, is which we should learn from that country too. There is no harm in learning what is happening good around in this world, is the way they have developed those ancillaries, and how quickly and the scale at which they have developed those ancillaries. And the third part is how the infrastructure has also been developed to reduce the cost of logistics, which is also very important factor, especially for the products which we are talking about. If you look at their logistics cost compared to our logistics cost, there is also an element, big gap out there. There is also an element which Hitesh Bhai mentioned, is the cost of power, which is very critical for our manufacturing, especially when you go to the cell side, or if we are going for the integration towards the wafer manufacturing or ingots manufacturing. The current level of industrial tariff which are there for us, if we compare apple to apple comparison, then our competitors are at a much lower level out there. So I think while we are looking at, I really appreciate the way the government is looking towards this whole idea about Atmanirbhar, incentivizing the manufacturing in this country, ring fencing it from imports from outside, announcing it early so that all investors can plan their projects accordingly. I think they are very right ways to do it. But however, to reach that level which we intend to reach, we need to be more agile and have to take more and more steps in that direction for people to come. That is also very important. We just can't rest ourselves with this, our BCD at a particular rate and a PLI for incentivizing it. We have to keep on investing ourselves from policy, and then on by the industry in taking advantage of this policy, and then export becomes a very important factor in this. I think we should not close our eyes, and we should not be inclusive and myopic enough only to look at India as a market. There is a huge brand value which made in India products have outside the country compared to our competitors. So if we are among equals between apples, the Shimla apples will definitely be a preferred than the other apples out there. And we should not lose sight that if we are creating this infrastructure, that we should also look for market outside this country too. And we are in a great position to do that.
Excellent, excellent. So you are saying even if it is a Shanghai apple, if it is a better quality apple, we'll have to look at it. even if we don't, even if some rival of ours is doing better than us, we have to be open to listening to him and following what is he doing, because very nicely you've said, and you've alluded to it, and that all over the world, renewable energy deployment came down in 2020. Only two countries it went up. One is US because of phasing out of subsidies, and the other is China. How it went? We have to really evaluate that it should not so happen that we bring any policy which reduces the speed of deployment here. It should be manufacturing supportive, Atmanirbhar, at the same time making sure that the deployment doesn't get phased out in any way. On another point, Ashish, I would like to ask you, I was reading this about the US market, and your knowledge about, you would be having knowledge about the Indian market also. And this is just to spark some kind of a debate so that we can both learn from each other, from you, and also the audience learns. In US, when they focused on new technologies, rather than rising, they collapsed. What happened? In the 2000s, when the silicon boom started, that, okay, solar also will go for silicon, and of course, the electronic sector will also go for silicon. Silicon prices started going up. When silicon prices started going up, a lot of PE funds invested in those renewable manufacturers who were looking for newer alternatives to silicon. Meanwhile, China focused on, say, scaling up silicon facilities and brought the prices down. Despite 301 against China, they could not do anything. The US industry kept on collapsing, and all the new technologies which they were working on came a cropper. So, is there some way of knowing that whether this technology will be able to really, let us say, leap over silicon, or some other way which makes us decide that the roads which we are taking on technological development are the right ones and have a high chance of yielding fruit? Ashish.
Well, Tawanji, I think what you're saying is difficult. It's a business risk which business community takes when they invest in a particular technology. There's one thing I think we should not lose a track on, which you also mentioned. When US started dipping in, was also primarily China was going up. There was one thing which was different between the two. China keep on having their own within the country requirements too, which they keep on jacking up. Even as we speak, last year they were looking at 48 to 52 gigawatt of Chinese installation, and this year we are hearing about 60 gigawatts in their own country. So what they have done very nicely is that, and they have a feed-in tariff system, and they have the schemes which also incentivize if you bring in the new technologies. So from a policy standpoint, which was not a part in US has been very open economy. You have a feed-in tariff system, but then we know it is the wire and the content and the services a lot matters out there. What Chinese have done from a policy standpoint is that at the fundamental level, they have always supported their manufacturing and infusion of investments in the technology and the scale, which works for them. That was the difference between the two. Similarly, I think the learning for us is we have an amazing, I would say today, opportunity within the country for solar as well as wind too. And that can be a good base case out here. As well as the technologies which are concerned, I think at a lab basis, we keep on evaluating many others. They are going to come. The only challenge here is when you are looking between two particular products, then whether the next generation product is cost effective enough to take care of the earlier product. I think at the end of the day, if you ask me, everything depends on how many electrons are coming on a per square meter size out there with a particular level of radiation. We are producing electrons, nothing else. All of us, whether I burn power or I do anything else out there, we are primarily producing electrons. Sometimes for certain shapes and sizes, you might have to develop products where you will get some premium. But at the end of the day, it is just the electrons production which we are doing. And in this manner, I think there are enough investments and technology available. The challenge which India will face when we take decision of the next level is whether it is cost effective enough to beat the earlier technology. And where we will have a challenge again, which compound is, first of all, as a culture, we are highly cost sensitive. Secondly, optically, we have now come to a level where if all of a sudden from 1 rupees 99 paisa, your tariff goes to 2 rupees 70 paisa, even it at the consumer end, we are selling at 5 rupees 40 paisa. We will still say it is, oh my God, what has happened? All of a sudden, the power has become very expensive. What has gone to solar? And we will have all sorts of news coming out there. I think we need to be very sensitive about this factor that we have to invest in it. Government has to support in it. There is no reason which I think, we have done great amount of work in IT segment. If you look at it from a services standpoint, we are impeccable. There's no reason in that this industry can also reach that level. We just need to support it for a particular duration of time. And I'm sure in next 3 to 4 years, you will find a very different renewables paraphernalia and a segment in this country.
Excellent points, Ashish ji. And what you have hit the nail on the head. And I was just remembering, reminded me of a figure. In 2006, the retail goods market in America was 4.5 trillion and in China was 1.5 trillion. Today, the retail goods market in America is 5 point some trillion, and in China it is nearly 6 trillion. That means the government is also doing other things through which the technological bets it takes can be absorbed in its own market. So it's a beautiful point you brought up, and I'll ask Blue Circle to surely pass this point on to to our policymakers, as well as the other points which have come from Hitesh and Rakesh. Coming back to Rakesh, let me just include some questions. There are more than 50 questions that we've already received. And so, Rakesh, this question is from Director of Ankur Fertilizers, Adip Mittal. Do lead acid batteries have future amidst lithium ion batteries? This is his question. I would like you to add my question also. What is the scope of electrical, chemical, mechanical, and thermal energy storage systems, in addition to the electrochemical space in which you already operate? So lead acid batteries in the electrochemical space, where do they stand amidst the lithium ion, and what are the other generic classes of energy storage systems? Some light on that, and where do they stand?
Right. Yeah, no, so unlike solar cells, panels, ingots, where there is a certain degree of standardization because all you produce is electrons, battery and storage system somehow is far more application-led technology, because there isn't that kind of standardization possible, because for different types of applications, different types of chemistries or other kinds of storage systems work better. So to answer the question of the gentleman from Ankur Fertilizers, see, lead acid batteries have been around for over 100 years, more than 150 actually. And there are certain applications where, due to its cost, stability, safety, and recyclability, there is no reason that they will get replaced anytime in the next maybe at least 10 years, I would say. I'll stick my neck out and say 10 years. I don't see a major demand destruction of lead acid batteries in certain applications. For example, engine starting applications, not much demand destruction is expected. For example, very small storage applications, not much demand destruction expected. There are many other applications where you will not see lithium replacing lead acid. But then there are applications where lithium batteries, with their falling price curve and the energy density being higher, will definitely replace lead acid batteries or will create new applications. So in my understanding, lithium batteries are complementary opportunity for battery companies and energy storage companies than really necessarily destroying the core of the demand of lead acid batteries, which is largely in areas where lithium is unlikely to penetrate completely. There's so probably about a 25-30% of the current application base of lead acid batteries is under threat by lithium, at least in the next 8-10 years. So we still believe that lead acid battery industry globally will still grow at about the same rate that it has grown over the last 5 years or the next 5 to 10 years, which means that it may not grow much more rapidly, but it will still grow. And especially in India, that opportunity is even more because of the nature of the market and the applications. Now, having said that, the new opportunities, for example, grid scale storage, electric vehicles, and even distributed storage, are given to lithium batteries by definition as applications. And to answer, Pawan, your question on storage technologies, there are definitely going to be storage technologies are going to be beyond lithium batteries for sure. And different applications will be more suited to certain types of storage technologies. For example, flow batteries is already something that has been widely used for large scale storage, and they are kind of getting over with their issues of round trip efficiency and some of the other stuff. There is also a promise in some of these thermal storage technologies, sodium ion, for example, liquid metal, for example. These are many of these other areas which will come in. But if you have to, make it a practical assessment of what will take off over the next 5 years, I think lithium batteries will be, for the renewable sector, probably the chemistry of choice or storage technology of choice, at least in India for the next 5-7 years.
Yeah, because of its efficiency, because of its charge density, because of its charging time, and it's a proven technology. And the rate and the prices you said are falling so fast. Very good questions we've got, and I'll take the next two questions to Hitesh. Hitesh, this question is from Mohan Gupta, analyst Marcom. He says, feedback on the recent announcement about the BCD from April 22. What is your feedback? Also, the solutions for the developer who bid at all-time low of 1.99 rupees per kilowatt hour. And in a similar vein, the question is coming from Arun Sarathi, who is VP ASEAN Infrastructure Finance. He says, without infrastructure support and aiding regulatory support, will increasing import duty on cells and modules alone kickstart the local manufacturing of modules in India? So similar questions from both of them.
Right. On the BCD side, I think this is a good, definitely for the manufacturing, and that's a feedback, and we welcome that. And I think this is what the country needs. not only for the manufacturing, but to grow and export across the globe. Once we have the scale manufacturing here, a lot of ancillary industries, R&D, and we will see the huge employment in this. Of course, there will be a question on the other side if there is an increase in a power price and all that. I think Ashish has rightly covered. If you put even the entire duty, if we consider that there will be 40% duty and Indian manufacturers' prices will be the same, of course, it will be never be. There's a huge competition between 200 manufacturers here. But theoretically, if we consider even a 40% duty, the entire cost of the power is not going to increase at 10%. But what you're getting against that, you're getting the money within a country and the opportunity to bring the price down within a 2 years than the today's level. So it's a welcome move. I think the second question was about
regarding increasing import duties on cell and modules alone kickstart the local manufacturing of modules in India, or infrastructure support and aiding regulatory setup is required?
Of course, it will start. I will not say no, but the support of infrastructure or ecosystem will fire the growth, and it will give the more number of manufacturers here. So infrastructure support and entire ecosystem support, I will say, because the module cannot be made without the glass. And today in the country, we have a huge shortage of the glass supply. Or we talk about the other components, including the aluminum frames and others. So infrastructures along with the complete ecosystem support will be required.
Great. Very good answer. Basically, you have said that BCD was important, some kind of protection was necessary, but it is not enough. We'll need the infrastructure support, regulatory support, etc. Great point. Lastly, let me come to Ashish. Ashish, this is a question for you. It has come from Manvendra Te of Exigo Recycling. And I ask you this question because Tata is so sustainability oriented also. How will you find solution to recycle your PV modules in India? Because there is going to be a gigantic solar waste, which is going to be generated in future. Ashish.
I do agree. I think let me not undermine the question and its criticality. You know, if you look at if we'll reach 100 gigawatt of solar from the space standpoint, we will be virtually covering one Switzerland only with the panels. So I do agree that there is a challenge. But yes, let's look at it that what is the challenge? The challenge is that how will we dispose them of? I think there are two factors in it. First of all, the panels, while being guaranteed for 25 years, can run for 30, 35 years without any challenge. So the life is not ending on that particular day. But even if, whenever the life ends, I think there are enough technologies available right now on extracting valuable metals from these panels. And these, by some of the studies, we have still not invested on it, but by some of the studies, it will be even more valuable than what we have created originally as a product. Because when people look at the cost of those valuable metals, whether it is silver and many others, 25 years down the line, they do expect value coming out of from this. The other factor, with the other initiative which many manufacturers are also taking today, is that when they are setting up their manufacturing units, I'm aware of one or two of them, they are also setting up a plant for disposing of these panels in case there is a challenge out there. So I think in the current context, while the question is very valid, we have opportunities of extracting valuable metals from these panels. And we also have opportunities of disposing them off without contaminating the Mother Earth or anything else from this. I think that's a way.
Fantastic. So there are many other questions and very high quality questions, but I will have to, because of the fact that we have exceeded our limit, a time limit, we'll have to close it here, and I'll pass it on to Siddharth. Siddharth.
So thank you very much, sirs. It's been such an inspiring discussion. Our leaders and I, we've taken on so many nuggets, learned a lot from today's conversation. Rest assured, the recording and the post-event articles which we create will certainly go to those who matter and the ones who are looking to learn from this, to policymakers and to leaders across the country. And thank you very much to our members and guests for joining us today and staying till the end in large numbers. Along with our weekly webinar series, we will soon be taking all these discussions live on the exclusive digital networking platform, which we're building specifically for leaders. We're very soon sending out invitations. Over 3,000 leaders have already signed up, and the leaders who are interested to engage with us, please do write to us to join the energy circle and also get access to the other circles which we're building. So thank you very much, sirs, once again. An absolute privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, panelists, for an enlightening session. And thank you, audience, for all your informed questions.
Thanks, Pawanji. Thanks,
Thank you.
Rakesh. Thanks, Rakesh. Bye.